Today I'm going to be learning more about hockey and in particular a Canadian hockey player called Eric Lindros. Now this video is called The Hit That Literally Ruined a Man's Career. So interested to watch this. I don't know much about Eric. I'll be honest, I don't know anything about Eric until I seen this video pop up. But I have watched videos about the biggest hits in hockey. And of course I know it's like a quite hard sport, quite powerful and stuff, but some of the hits I've seen when players get flipped over, or you see their body just get almost split in half, it gets quite almost dangerous. So interested to learn more about Eric and what happened to him with a hit. Tell me if you know about this story, tell me what you think about it. Let's learn.
This is Eric Lindros, and on May 26th, 2000, the Philadelphia Flyers find themselves in a Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals against the New Jersey Devils. But the thing is, Eric Lindros shouldn't even be playing in this game. Yet, he's looking to be the difference maker early in order to help the Flyers advance to the Stanley Cup Final. As he winds up to slice through the neutral zone, he doesn't know that he's about to make the biggest mistake of his hockey career. Every once in a while, there's a player that comes along who has the potential to completely change the entire sport. We call these players generational talents. Players like Gretzky, Lemieux, and, well, Eric Lindros. From day one, Lindros was touted to be the next one. The hype was real and deserved too when you watched him play. Lindros was elite in terms of offensive ability, but unlike so many other players who have scored and racked up points over the years, Lindros brought a physical presence to the ice that hockey fans had never seen out of such a talented player. At 6'4", 240 pounds, it was almost impossible to slow this man down. Seeing a big man move the way he did in the 90s was extremely rare. This gave Lindros the advantage over every player because he could power through you just as easily as he could dance around you.
Yeah, he said that was rare in the 90s. Is it more common now? Do you get these big guys like a 6'4" guy on the ice, coming towards you at that speed? That's actually a scary thought in itself. Tell me more. I didn't realise he was so highly rated, like a generational talent. Could be the one, but tell me what you think about him as a player.
He was a big man with small man skill. However, coming into the NHL, there were a few incidents that made Lindros a polarizing character. Lindros was selected first overall by the Quebec Nordiques, and instead of doing what every first overall pick has done, Lindros decided to hold out. The Nordiques would end up dealing him to the Philadelphia Flyers, and so the Lindros era was born in the NHL.
What does hold out mean? Just not choosing to go there?
And was absolutely loved by Philly with the way that he played the game. A complete superstar who could score, hit, fight, and play with the pure emotion that made it easy for the city of Philly to love. But when you play that physical of a game, it is extremely taxing on your body. As in the first 7 years of his career in Philly, it was filled with production, but also nagging injuries. He won a Hart Trophy and led the Flyers all the way to the Cup Final, but ultimately was swept by Detroit. That was a tough pill to swallow for Lindros and the Flyers, but he was still in his mid-20s entering his prime. But the way Lindros played the game was he lived by the sword and died by the sword with his physical play. And because he was so big, players started to return the favor. One of those players was Devils defenseman Scott Stevens. At 6'2", 215, Stevens was one of the most punishing open ice hitters the NHL has ever seen. And he intimidated pretty much everyone in hockey except for Eric Lindros, who over the years never seemed to back down from Stevens. Now that bad blood would spill into this Eastern Conference Final matchup between the Devils and the Flyers.
Jeez.
But this is a matchup that Eric Lindros shouldn't even be a part of. Even though Lindros missed games in every season due to injury the years prior, the 99-2000 season was one that was filled with a different kind of injury: concussions. Eric Lindros was a near-perfect player, but he had one tiny little flaw, and that was that he had the habit of skating with his head down. And while his size made it difficult to catch him in a vulnerable position, it was only a matter of time before someone would get their shot, which would lead to this hit by Darius Kasparaitis, giving Eric Lindros his first concussion in the 1998 season.
Yeah, about concussion, obviously I hear that being talked about with regards to American football, But when you see how like how powerful hockey is, how much impact there is, it's like of a similar nature, but even like you could say they're moving faster on that ice sometimes. So is it a talking point in hockey? Is it something people worry about? Do they try and minimise it in any way? Obviously got the helmets, but has it been a serious thing that people have talked about with regards to hockey?
The Flyers, like most pro sports teams, knew so little about concussions that they initially sent him to a migraine specialist. To make things even worse, his 98-99 season had ended shortly after the Flyers were slow to diagnose Lindros with a collapsed lung after a road game. The next season for Lindros would be a complete disaster, as the timeline went like this. In December of 1999, Calgary's Jason Weimer laid a hit on Lindros to give him another concussion. He only missed 2 games. Mid-January would roll around, and a couple of hits in a single shift in a game against Atlanta would lead to another concussion for Lindros. This time, he missed a grand total of 4 games. Early March would roll around, and Boston's giant blue liner Hal Gill would also rock Lindros. Lindros would stay in the game and played for an entire week before his concussion was finally diagnosed by the team's medical staff. Lindros would then sit out for the rest of the regular season. And in early May, Lindros was skating with the Flyers farm club on a conditioning stint and collided with a teammate in practice and had apparently suffered yet another concussion. But that didn't stop him from suiting up in late May and re-entering the lineup in the conference finals against the Devils. After 4 concussions in one season, Eric Lindros finds himself back on the ice in a Philly uniform. There were public disputes between the Flyers GM Bobby Clarke and Lindros' parents regarding how the team was handling his health. Teammate John LeClaire said at the time when Lindros was getting concussions, the Flyers medical staff were basically saying just give him a couple days and he'll be fine. On top of that, late in the season, a year after the collapsed lung, the Flyers stripped Lindros of his captaincy. So the fact that he's even in this game is a mistake for Lindros,
like
the NHL,
so badly,
and player safety in general. But just 7 minutes into this game, Lindros would make the one mistake that no hockey player should ever make.
Turnover at center. Here's 88. Lindros makes the move, and Lindros is hammered down to the ice by Scott Stevens. And Lindros remains down on the ice as all the other players come together.
Oh boy. Oh boy. This is the worst case scenario here.
So the player that like he went into or that banged him, did the person do that purposely, do you think? Is that something that would be like in football we have like a red card where you get like sent off? Would there be a similar equivalent in hockey? Is it deserving of that, do you think? I don't know if that's more like a normal thing you would see, but I mean, I'm sure people know his history at that point to do something like that. That seems quite almost like evil, man.
Eric Lindros. Stevens came across.
His head,
entering the Devil's
really
zone, Lindros would cut into the middle of the ice with his head down towards the side of none other than Scott Stevens. Now, by today's standards in the NHL, this is maybe the dirtiest type of hit you can land against another player. Today, it would draw a 5-minute major, game misconduct, and definitely suspension because the principal point of contact from Stevens' shoulder was the chin and the forehead of Lindros.
Need for that at all.
That game and that hit would mark the end of Lindros' career as a Flyer and his future as an NHL superstar. To add insult to injury, the Flyers lost Game 7 2-1, and they also lost perhaps the greatest power forward of his generation. Lindros would sit out the entire following season with post-concussion syndrome while demanding a trade that would eventually come with the New York Rangers. After that, Lindros would only play in 5 more seasons, but he was a shell of the player that he once was. The physical play that separated him as a superstar just completely disappeared. Rangers captain Mark Messier even said at the time that the concussions were an issue to the point where Lindros would give a hit and it would impact him almost instantly. Suffering that many concussions in that short of a time period would seriously jeopardize anyone's career. But this hit would be the final dagger to ruin Lindros' career indefinitely. Lindros would then retire after the 2007 season, and during his 13-year career, he missed the equivalent of 2 or more seasons because of injuries, most of which were concussion-related. If he remained healthy, Lindros could have been one of the all-time greats. For his entire career with the Philadelphia Flyers, Lindros averaged 1.3 points per game, which placed him at the time in 4th place behind only Gretzky, Lemieux, and Bobby Orr. He was on pace to be one of the greatest players to ever lace them up. Lindros wasn't the only victim of a Scott Stevens hit, by the way, as 3 years later, he would do something similar to superstar Paul Kariya, except Kariya came back 5 minutes after that hit and gave us one of the most legendary moments in hockey history.
Near side Kariya. Kariya, the fans want one.
It's a strong finish.
Despite that great moment though, Kariya admitted after that he had no recollection of the next 3 days and ultimately ended up retiring because of concussions as well. In today's NHL, the league has come a long way in player safety with concussion spotters and headshots to avoid more situations like Lindros and Kariya. But this moment right here is a mistake that could have been completely avoided. First by the organization and then by the player himself. For a player that made very few mistakes at the height of his dominance, this one flaw in his game ultimately ruined what could have been one of the most dominant careers in NHL history.
That was that was incredibly sad, man. He seemed like such a brilliant player as well. But I mean, they said that it's up to the. I mean, I guess also you can look at who should have stopped that. Like, is it the association, the NHL themselves? Should they have stepped in and said, look, you can't send this guy out. You're not allowed to do this. He's had too many concussions. But could you say that with any injury? If somebody keeps getting leg injuries, can you say, can we stop this now because you're going to do long-term damage? But something like concussion is just that extra part because it affects your brain, which then in turn affects your whole being, your whole body. It's good to see they've got more improved guidelines at the moment. The other one is his team. Should his manager just say, look, we can't send you out, I've got responsibility here. But sometimes you know that they're in this situation where they're under pressure to win games, so they'll just put players out no matter what condition it is. And then obviously he has that ability to say as well, you say, this is my career, maybe I should retire. But again, when you're getting this income and it's your job, to give it up and then have no income and maybe be supporting a family, a lifestyle and so on, it's a very difficult decision to make. But yeah, just so sad that it got so far. And then that tackle by Stevens, yeah, very dirty. Shouldn't have happened again. But you see, I guess that sort of thing does happen quite often in hockey as a sport. These sort of tackles, but are challenges. Tell me what you think about that. Tell me more about Eric Lindros and his career and what you think it could have been. Tell me what you think about the concussion issue, protocols, any other examples of this in history and how it compares to something like American football as well. But tell me what you think about this. Thanks.